In the previous video, I introduced the Lorch Model B clock and instrument maker's lathe. In this video, I'll be working on cleaning up the headstock and lathe bed and getting them ready for use. Welcome to Adventures with a Very Small Lathe. I established in the first video that the headstock is turning fairly well. It's now been soaking in oil for a while and it's turning even better. I now want to have a closer look at it and see if I can work out what needs to be done to make sure this runs really well. I'm going to start by taking the headstock, the chuck off. The easiest way I found to do this without having to grip it is to engage the back gear. That's done by pulling this back and pushing this lever down. The spindle is now effectively locked, which means I can turn the chuck easily and it comes off. The spindle is locked because the gear is engaged, but also the main drive is still engaged. So there are effectively two separate ratios, the direct drive and the ratio down drive, both connected between the pulley and the spindle at the same time. And those two contradict each other, so it can't possibly turn. In order for the back gear to work, the spindle here needs to be disconnected from the pulleys so that the pulleys are only driving the spindle through the back gear, not attempting to do it directly. So this pin pulls back and now the pulleys can turn easily. And the spindle with the pin is now turning at a much lower ratio through the back gear. This will be obvious to anybody who's owned a back gear lathe before, but this is my first time, so I'm learning it from scratch. To get a better idea about what condition it's in and what needs doing, I'm going to take these two covers off and see what's underneath. With the cover off, I can see the back gear much better and see at least that it's reasonably well covered in oil at this stage. A lot of this is oil I just splashed on. I'm going to add a bit more while I've got the covers off. I can see down under the spindle where there seems to be quite a bit of grime and old chips built up. But it's really, really hard to get in there properly and see what state everything is in. Probably is going to be necessary to completely strip down the spindle in order to be able to get in there properly. And I'm not really interested in doing that right now because right now it runs and I may do something that makes the adjustment of the bearings incorrect, at which point I may do damage if I don't know what I'm doing. So I'm going to hold off doing anything to the bearings until I know exactly how to adjust those correctly. Instead, I'm going to try and work out whether I can get the headstock off and see if I can get in from the underside. Before I do that, I'm going to put the covers back on because I think handling this with the covers on is safer than continuing to do it with the covers removed. And let's get the back gear disengaged. Just like everything else, the headstock is screwed down and can be accessed through this port in the main block of the headstock. which makes it pretty difficult to get to. There's another port around the back of the base that also gives access to the same nut, but it's substantially thinner. The whole area is kind of obstructed by the motor frame, so I think I'm probably going to remove the motor frame to get it out of the way before I try and work on this. Once the nut's undone, this is going to slide forward so the nut can travel along here. So I want to make sure the ways are free of all the detritus that's built up during disassembly before I do that. I'm also going to add a glob of the cleaning oil that I'm using to try and make sure that it moves easily. So I've got it loose. I want to turn it a little bit, but not so it drops so far down that it no longer fits here. Okay, seems to be sticking. It needs to be fiddled until it's just low enough to make sure that the block can clear any of the debris. There's a lot of built-up debris on the underside here, but still not be low enough that it will catch on the bottom here. But after a lot of fiddling, I got it to the point where it clears. And I can now loosen this without fear of it dropping down inside the casting. And it's filthy. And now it should lift straight off. So one of the reasons this wouldn't move forward as easily as I was expecting is this cutout here, which lines up exactly with where the back gear was. So the back gear is slightly too large to clear this way, except in this location. So when the headstock was moved forward, one of the teeth of the gear was hitting that. So the whole headstock had to be lifted slightly and then pushed forward. It's going to be really important to be very, very careful with that, because it's almost impossible to tighten and loosen the nut except by moving it forward. But when it is moved forward, it has to be lifted to make sure it clears and doesn't get damaged on the corner of this way. It's really nice to see the scrape marks still there on the place where the headstock was scraped to fit onto the bed.
To help shift the really heavy grease, I'm starting with a quick dash of WD-40 equivalent. I don't use this as much as I used to, as it dries too quickly and leaves a sticky residue behind.
As usual, everything gets drenched in cleaning oil. This oil I'm using is a high detergent engine flushing oil, which is not suitable for long-term lubrication, but is great for really getting the dirt away and getting it dissolved. So all of this is going to have to come off before the lathe is going to be used. Let's take the covers back off so I can see more clearly what's going on. There's a lot of dirt built up underneath the wheels here, which looks like it's a mixture of fibrous material and metal chips. So I'm guessing that's debris from belt wear mixed with chips from machining. From this angle you can see some of the worst of the debris build-up around here behind the wheel. I don't want to scratch it too much with the screwdriver, so I've melted this toothbrush into an angle so I can get back there. By no means a perfect solution, but it's helping.
The sludge is too thick and sticky for the toothbrush to shift it.
Use a bit of white spirit, see if I can help it. The back of this drive wheel is also covered in build-up, but you can see much more clearly how the pin for the back gear drive works. Let's just wipe that off with a cloth. I think I'm going to need another straight toothbrush to go with this, just to help me out. So I've gathered a good scrub around inside and dislodged as much of the heavy detritus as possible and wiped over the surfaces where there was any build-up there. I'm now going to shove some old greasy rags in and try and mop up what's left of the oil and white spirit I used to clean it. There's a bunch of grime I missed there. Should have given that more of a scrub. You can see the quantity of sludge that came out during that cleaning. I'm going to have to put extra effort into cleaning the ways back into clearing it clean again. Let's get rid of this filthy paper. I'm trying to get as much sludge as possible off these gears just to make sure they're running smooth without any extra wear. Unfortunately, the way these are protected does nothing to prevent chips from getting in, so that is a risk I'll have to keep an eye on. That said, they do look in pretty good condition. It's really, really cool to be able to see the original scraping on the underside of the headstock. This is something I mentioned in an earlier video, the fact that this will have been scraped to fit the bed. This is not a moving surface because this gear aligns with the notch that I already talked about in the bed. So the only reason this would be scraped is in order to make it fit really, really well and have a really, really good solid contact surface. I'm not sure whether this build up here is a problem, but I think only this area is in contact with the bed, so I think this is just where detritus or paint has built up at the edge of the interface. Right, now I've finished doing most of the heavy detritus removal. I'm just going to quickly re-lubricate everything. And go at any of the points where the white spirit might have got in the way and prevented lubricating oil, washed away the lubricating oil and made problems. That's pretty much how well it was going before. Now I've got it, I think this is as clean as I can reasonably get it without rebuilding it, and I don't want to rebuild it right now because I don't know what I'm doing with the bearings. But let's have a look at the various different features that we can now see. I've already talked about how the back gear works, but you can now see it much, much more clearly. There's an interesting mechanism here alongside the headstock bearings, which I've never seen before, and I'm keen to learn more about. The housing around the bearing there appears to have teeth like a gear around the edge of it, and at this point here there appears to be what looks like another sort of gear with this bolt head on the end of it. This one is extremely badly worn, but some of the faces are still there, so it may still be technically possible to turn it. This is present on this face and also on this opposite face, though obviously it's much more difficult to get the camera in on this side. So what it looks like we have is bolts in these positions, which have a gear built into them that meshes with what looks like a gear that runs around the bearing. There are retaining screws just here, which are standard hex head Allen retaining screws, which look like they are holding those bolts in position. My best theory is that this is some kind of mechanism for preloading the bearings or adjusting the bearings. So I'm not going to touch anything, I'm not going to risk loosening that or playing with it until I know exactly what I'm doing. Because right now the bearings run just fine, and I don't want to do anything that might cause them to get damaged.
The seats for the covers are covered with a thick sludge, so I'm scraping that off to make sure the covers fit correctly.
The headstock overall is a lot cleaner now, and it's almost ready to go back on, but there's a couple of things on the front I wanted to have a look at. The first is this hole here, which looks like an oil port of some kind, probably that provides oil to the gears that are behind this cover. The second is having a better look at this lever here for engaging the back gear. It's got this cover on the front which covers up the mechanism. So it looks like we have two gears here which transfer the lever action to raising and lowering that bottom part of the back gear train. This plunger has a tendency to get stuck in the in position at this end of the travel. The part where the lever goes through the cover is open to the air when the machine is running, so it looks like chips get in there behind the cover. Just give those a quick scrub to get them out. And make sure there's a reasonable amount of oil on those gears. Or an excessive amount. And that pops straight back on. While I've got the whole bed clear with the headstock off, I'm going to have a good go at getting this metal as clean as possible, which I'm going to use more of this flushing oil with high solvent content and detergent content. I'm going to leave this for at least 24 hours, just to give this oil a really good chance to dissolve all the grime and give the best chance of lifting that grime off without damaging the metal in any way. The bed has now been soaking in cleaning oil for several days, and I'm going to try and see if I can remove any of the remaining stubborn dirt before I clean it off. Just starting off with a soft wire brush made of brass, which makes sure I don't damage any of the steelwork. So the rust patches that had formed in the place where the gear swings seem to be coming off pretty nicely with that wire brush. I'm going to avoid brushing over the scraped area because I don't want to actually make the slightest wear to those scraped surfaces at all. Besides, they're pretty clean, so I'm not worried about that. There's a fair amount of small pitting in the surface of the bed itself, so this is helping get in there and get anything out dislodged that might stay in there and cause more corrosion or any abrasives that might have got embedded. Prism section gets pretty much the same treatment. Unlike an engine lathe, this is not a sliding surface. It is the reference for the static component sitting on the bed. So it needs to be precise, but it doesn't need to be a smooth sliding surface. Under the lathe here, there's a surface where the clamping nuts that hold the parts to the bed sit, and I want to make sure that is fairly free of debris as well, so that when the lathe is being fixed in position, there isn't debris which causes movement or instability. All this has been soaked in oil just like everything else, so it needs to be scrubbed down. Now that everything has been scrubbed, I'm going to use a hard plastic scraper to try and scrape off anything left, including most of the cleaning oil. The cleaning oil has detergents and other ingredients in it, make it suitable for cleaning. That means I don't want it left lying around on the lathe when I'm using it, where I'll replace it with decent quality slide-away oil. The oil building up on the scraper does seem to be pretty dirty, which is a sign I'm actually shifting that dirt off the lathe. This is a hard plastic scraper that comes with some 2-part fillers, and I'm using it because it should be hard enough to dislodge dirt while being guaranteed to be soft enough to not damage the steel or the iron. Now the bulk of the oil has been scraped off, the final step is to wipe down any remaining with cotton rag before I apply some whey oil to keep it clean and protected. The slide-away oil is Mobile Vectra 1, which I've been using for some time on almost all my machines, but on all the sliding surfaces. Okay, I've cleaned down most of the guts underneath of this headstock. I've cleaned up the wheels, I've cleaned up the back gear engagement mechanism, and I've checked over all the features. This is all I'm going to do for now, because anything more than this is going to require a full disassembly and rebuild. So for now I'm going to put it back on the machine and keep trying out the rest of the features. Before the headstock goes back on, there's just a couple of precautions I want to take. Firstly, I'm just going to wipe off the excess oil on the mounting surface, as there's no need for too much oil to get trapped between the contact surfaces. Secondly, I know that the gear has to go in this slot here, but it's not really possible to place the headstock directly down where that is, because I need to fit and engage the nut that will hold the whole assembly down. So I'm going to put this piece of cloth here so that when I bring the headstock in, that gear won't crash directly into the bed and damage either the gear or the bed itself. So I'll pop that there for now, and then put the head on top of that. Once I have everything assembled, I can lift it slightly to pull that out, and then slide it into place very gently, making sure that the gear doesn't scrape against this bed.
The lathe is back together and looking a lot better, so I'm ready for the next phase. In the next video, I'll be looking into the electrics, which have quite a few problems that some observant viewers spotted in episode 1. Thanks for watching, take care, I love you all.